4:00 p.m. This is Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. This is the Bluff Town Council regular meeting. Roll call.
Linda Sosa. Jennifer Davila. Luanne Hook.
Britt Hornsby.
Ann Leppanen.
Erin Nelson, serving as town manager.
So the first thing is approval of the February 4th, 2025 Bluff Town Council meeting minutes. Has everybody read them? Are there any changes, modification, points of discussion?
I motion that we approve the minutes for February fourth as presented. Second. I think Lou seconded. Oh, okay. Didn't hear you.
Who seconded?
I did.
Can you speak up a little louder? Neither.
I know, I forget you.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? It's unanimous. Next is approval of the February 4th, 2025 Bluff Town Council public hearing minutes. Has everybody read them, reviewed them, and are there any changes or modifications?
Motion to approve February 4th Bluff Town Council public hearing minutes.
A second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? It's unanimous. Approval of the February 11th, 2025 Bluff Town Council work session. Has everybody read them? And are there any changes, points, discussion, modifications?
Motion to approve February 11th, 2025 Bluff Town Council work session minutes.
I have one comment. You want to wait for a second?
Sure.
Second. It's just on number 7. It's just just for searching purposes. It's sort of SERDA.
Is it spelled like a mattress? Like
Yes.
Almost with a D. Almost. It's a D. It's or SER. Well, it's with the RT, but the E instead of U. Otherwise.
And all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the last set are the approval of the February 18th, 2025 Bluff Town Council regular meeting minutes. Any changes, discussion, modification?
I wasn't there, so I'll abstain from this.
I will motion to approve these minutes as for February 18th, 2025 as presented. Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Abstaining.
And those February 11th minutes, I voted. I was not at the meeting, but I listened to the recording.
So there were 4 ayes and 1 abstention. All right. Then there will be a 3-minute time limit for anyone that wishes to make a public comment. If you exceed the 3-minute time limit, the meeting controller will mute you. Raise your hand. If you're online, or use the hand icon, and if you're in the audience, just let us know if you wish to make a public comment. So we'll start with the audience first. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to make a public comment? Then online.
The chat box has been open. I don't see anyone who's popped a name in there, and I do not see anyone who's raised a hand at this time.
All right, then we will close the public comment and move to number 1, which is for discussion and vote on the request to vacate 1 Appleton Alley. And we've had this on the agenda a couple of times, so Britt, for your information, we didn't, at the last meeting, we didn't vote on it because there was one piece that we still didn't have. So it was pushed over to this meeting, and this is just by way of reference. We have a policy with a resolution that lays out how we consider, vacate, or dispose of property like the alleys. And when the town inherited the alleys and the roads, there were some sections in the alley piece and in the buffer zones that the county had partially addressed, but not completely addressed. And so this is the first one that we've had come to us where it's a partial vacating of the alley to desert roads. And then the other half of the alley remained with the town. And for public policy reasons, if the entity is going to vacate, they really vacate the entire alley. You just don't vacate a section of it because it poses survey issues, it poses land issues, it poses enforcement issues. And so what we have is a request from Coral Sands, Mike Harris and Pam Yaris, to be granted that one half of the alley that is adjacent to Coral Sands. And if everyone remembers, this is the property that they received a grant to put solar on, which they've already done, they're working on. They re-engineered the placement of panels and whatever. So they, at the meeting that Pam Yaris spoke at, she said they no longer need that for their solar panels, but they would still like to have it. So I'll just open it up for comment and thoughts.
One half of an alley is not an alley.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to me to rectify this and resolve it. I don't know, what would we do if we kept it? I mean, I guess is my thing. It seems like we have several of these kind of weird problematic properties. It'd be awesome to not have a problem with them anymore, but that's my thinking on it.
I kind of am in agreement with that. I don't see what you can do with half of an alley as well. And Mike and Pam went through diligent steps to try to follow our process, and I appreciate that, them being kind of the first who've done this, and so I don't have a problem with vacating it.
And my comment would be that we did do a resolution saying, we don't want to give away with our town properties. But, and we're cleaning up a lot of what San Juan County did, and a lot has been illegally done, it appears. It hasn't been decided in court that way, but there are some measures. However, this one is different. The other half has been given away. There are no utilities in the alley. There were no public comments telling us that we need it for A, B, or C. It's not the same as the other alleys in town. It's not a buffer. It's not something that goes between houses. So I just think it's a completely different animal compared to what we might see ahead of time. Everything to the west was vacated and built upon. It's not just sitting there empty. So despite our resolution, I think that this one's okay to go ahead and vacate this 10 feet and not try to get back the other 10 feet. And there's not a reason to go that route in my mind for our town.
I guess my question is there a difference between want and need in our ordinance? If someone wants something, well, previously they needed it, and they've changed. They figure out a way to do it with that.
So you're saying that they haven't brought us a need to have it, just wanting. And one problem with keeping it is then it's our responsibility to maintain it and keep the fire hazard down and whatever. And then we've got 10 feet that we're supposed to take care of between these two property owners. So I don't know. I think this was just a real oddball.
I agree with everything that's been said. One, it's a San Juan County mess. We have two others that we'll be looking at some point. We can't do anything with 10 feet. I seriously doubt you could get emergency vehicles through that 10 feet if somebody were to develop the front part between 191 and the alley. I appreciate the artists worked around it while we were working through the process. But I do feel like with this one, we should see this as the exception to the resolution and go ahead and vacate this. And for anyone listening or who isn't aware, if you look back historically, what the county has done, county has bounced all over. They've denied requests, they've granted requests, and they've sold them. You cannot sell alleys. And so for anybody who thinks that, well, maybe the town is going to get, you know, a little bit of money from the RSs, that is not the situation. We aren't selling, we're just vacating. And then there's some paperwork that would need to be done if we vote to vacate it. And since we haven't done this before, I'll have to do a little bit of discussion of what we do next.
I know there's state laws, you know, revolving around this sort of thing too, so that the state keeps the counties and the cities from doing things that are not okay.
So next step, motion.
Yeah, motion to approve vacating one half of the alley under discussion. Do I need more specific? I don't have that.
So I'll second it, amending it to be in block 19, Cottonwood Addition subdivision, section 26, township 40 south, range 21 east, SOD and M in Bluff. And it's the south section of the alley that's adjacent to the Desert Rose.
South section between the, yeah, between 6th and 7th.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Right, it's unanimous, and then I'll just reach out to the RSs and see what the next step is. Then number 2 is a presentation of the proposals for quality assurance project plan for the Cooperative Cultural Center in response to the issue of RFP, and that's from the accountants and federal.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you again. It's been a while. So we received one bid for our quality assurance project plan. It is from R&R Environmental out of Sandy, Utah. They have quoted $18,000 for the development delivery of this of an updated asbestos survey report, and then an additional hourly rate until the end of the project of $110. Their projected start date would be March 12th and completion date June of 2025. At this time, we would like to take this to the DRC and discuss it and provide you with a recommendation. But I did want to bring it up to you guys first. If you have any questions or anything you want us to specifically ask at DRC or investigate before then.
So the 18,000 is to develop the plan to deal with it, not to deal with it.
Correct.
Okay.
So that is for our plan, which is required by the EPA because there was asbestos that is found in the building. And I did look up in previous minutes, in April of 2023, the town spent $9,000 on the asbestos testing. And I'm curious, I haven't reached out to this group. I'm curious if that 18,000 includes another asbestos testing, which
Because we
they're welcome to, if there are certain parts they want to test again, since the ceiling wasn't demolished at that point, since there might be other locations that there might.
yeah,
be
but we hate to pay a duplicate.
But yep.
So I'd say that's one big question.
Do they have any projection on this hourly rate, like, or on what the hours would be? They give any kind of?
No,
And the way that the request for proposals, or request for proposals was written, was that the development of the project or a development of the plan is kind of like that big 18,000. And then if we needed them for additional consultation, then what would their hourly rate be? So it's not a built-in, known hourly,
Okay.
but if we needed help, executing the plan, then they could consult after that fact.
Okay.
I
That's what got me until the end of the project. Made it sound like it was within that 18,000.
No. One thing that I would ask Malia that we verify is whether that 110 exceeds the EPA's limitations on the hourly rate, because for federal projects, you cannot go over a certain dollar amount for consultation, or excuse me, for consultants. And I don't know what that is. This might be within scope. It might not be, but that would be something that we would want to make sure on our end that we would even be able to pay out of the grant. And then just to kind of give you an idea, so when I had originally, give you all an idea, when I had originally put together a little bit of research before we even before we even finalized the EPA grant, there was a contact who said that a plan like this would probably cost somewhere around $5,000. And so, this definitely does exceed that rate by quite a bit. So I agree with Luanne that we would want to verify, does this include additional testing? Because this is a little bit steep. And I will say, since we only received one bid, that might be something that the DRC wants to determine as well, is, did very good due diligence in trying to get as much interest in this proposal or in the RFP as possible. But since we only received one, I think that DRC should talk about that too, if additional steps would be needed to get a more competitive rate.
And do you have the tests that were sent in before? Do you have those results and stuff?
Yeah.
Pass them on to
Yeah, they were all attached to the RFP, so they all have referenced them, or at least hopefully, just when they were preparing this for us.
In the EPA budget, was there an amount estimated for this plant?
5,000, I believe it was 5,500.
Yeah, so it is quite a bit.
Yeah.
Steeper
Three
than
times.
what was estimated.
Especially if they're just gonna tell us to cover it up with cement.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would like to say, yeah.
It's not like it's scattered throughout the whole building.
Yeah.
It was in the RFP if there were additional hazardous area, they should advise on that, lead, whatever it is, inside the building only. So not necessarily limited to asbestos, but I think given that there is known asbestos, especially given that we're looking to mitigate another is besides removal. The other thing, we always do have the option to work with the EPA to change around funds. But certainly our purpose thus far has been attempting to put as much into construction as possible. Whereas, this is definitely just the EPA covering themselves. So.
This does get us to the next step of construction, though. This must be done before construction can start.
Correct.
This is just where you can get really jacked on budgets, is when
Yeah.
the things on paper end up taking a ton, and then you get screwed where you're like, well, hell, I just blew the budget on this creeping up on me. So that's my only concern about the 18.
So you'll take it to DRC this Thursday or next?
This
the next
Thursday.
one?
Cool.
All right, then, being optimistic, I'll just move this forward to our next meeting, which should be the 18th.
This is only the 4th, so, our regular
If
meeting.
you, right.
Work
the
session.
next- Yeah, not the work session. the
I
next
guess
meeting.
maybe if they could give more of
For
a
her to
broken
report back.
down, like the scope of what they're gonna do
Yeah.
exactly, instead of just 2 little paragraphs.
Yeah.
Would be helpful for that 18, like,
Yeah.
here's this 18 going.
Right.
So other than the
Right.
organizational chart, which just looks like a bunch of people are involved,
Yeah.
so. that
Yeah,
would be
because
helpful.
their breakdown, their phase 1 site visit to confirm the survey.
Yeah.
The site visit will also consist of meeting with the town of Bluff to
Yeah.
ensure the efficacy of the approach and to discuss any potential deficiencies. The meeting and site visit is anticipated within 2 weeks of the formal project award and acceptance, and then QAP design. And so within 6 weeks. And so is 18,000 just them driving down here and staying in a
Like, I
hotel?
just wanna- Yeah, I just wouldn't mind seeing, they have to have like a budget, like
Yeah.
itemize, I just like
Yeah.
to see it. they can.
Okay.
And then going back to the DRC, Britt, you're back on, right? I'm off.
You're off.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Well, this is for Thursday, right? Okay. Thursday is our strategic planning meeting.
Yeah, I know. I got 1 to 2 and then.
Yeah, I don't anticipate that this will be a long year. I mean, I guess it could be, but kind of seems like in our last TRC meeting that this one might not necessarily be so long.
And I'm anticipating trying to meet with Jana beforehand.
Okay.
Okay.
So that maybe we can.
Yeah.
But yes, noted. I saw that today.
Yeah, it's a week of meetings.
Yes.
All right, thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, Malia.
Thanks,
Thank
Malia.
you.
All right, next is the report and discussion regarding county building permitting and the need for town permitting system, including the building inspection process. And so I'll let Erin start with. I can if you'd like.
I feel free to cut in. So we were notified by Kristen Bushnell, who is the San Juan County Planning Administrator, that San Juan County will no longer handle the administration of building permits for the town. So up until this point, they've been handling the permitting, paperwork, all of the inspections. And then, each of the builders or, folks needing a building permit would work with them directly after receiving a land use clearance from planning and zoning, our planning and zoning. And so effective immediately, San Juan County will not be issuing new building permits. All of the ones that are currently in their system, they will handle of the folks who have been accepted and they've paid their fees. So this puts us in what is quite clearly an emergency situation where we need to adopt building code. So I had quite a few conversations over the last week. I did visit Monticello and Blanding. Part of the reason why the county is probably having a little bit of trouble, not to read too much into what's going on, but their building inspector is leaving them for a sheriff's position or deputy position, excuse me. And when I went to go visit with Blanding City, their building inspector quit on Monday and gave them 4 days notice. So retire. He's been with them 35 years, but he is no longer there either. And so originally my hope was that we could work with Blanding to potentially utilize their building inspector, but that is not on the table right now since they are actively looking for a part-time building inspector. When I had discussions with both cities, they indicated that they would be interested potentially in an interlocal agreement, but they need to kind of work out their stuff first before they take on anything else. And Bluff still needs its own building code because we've just been defaulting to the county code. So luckily, unluckily, depending on how you look at it, a lot of this stuff is very technical. And so I don't want to say it's just going to be copy and pasted over because that is not the case. But the building codes in the areas around us are very similar to each other. We would need to pass code and we would need to amend the master fee schedule, which you'll see as a discussion for later on this meeting. But that's kind of the situation we're in right now. Given that this was, we really received no notice, I think that it would make sense for us to explore other emergency stopgap options, like potentially contracting someone who could do some of this work for us. I mean, even if we had the building code and at least they're familiar with the process, quite clearly, none of us are building inspectors. We're not going to go out and be inspecting properties. However, we do have, once the building code is in place, we do have the ability to go out and enforce the building code, which would include, going through the permitting and everything. So not the best situation. And can you add where maybe I have gaps and then we can take questions from council if they have any?
So Erin and I were at the commission meeting when there was a discussion between Kristen Bushnell's department, the county attorney, and the commissioners. and Matt McDonald about doing 2 contract positions. And let's just say that it went poorly. And now both of the people who had been interested in doing the contract positions for the county and possibly for other entities, one was the person who went to the sheriff's department, and one was someone who is working in another municipality. They both have decided they have no interest in working with San Juan County and probably no interest in having anything trickle down to us. The one kind of correction on what Erin stated, it's not really a correction. One emphasis is if you don't have your building permit in hand, even if you've done the land use clearance, you are not going to get a building permit, period. And we have one building right now where the building continues. There is no building permit. The application was rejected. And despite my best arguments and Erin's best arguments as to why the county should finish up with that particular project, they are not going to. So we need to have a building inspector in an emergency process now, not in 3 months. So Erin, as you see, when we get further down, she's put together fee schedule. We've worked on picking a date for a public hearing on the fee schedule with the idea that we are now going to have a building department.
And it should be noted, so certain ordinances do need to go to public hearing, like land use, as well as anything to do with like financials and budgeting and things like that. But there are, as far as I can tell, no regulations as to something like this going to public hearing, because to be frank, and sorry for folks listening, it's not up to the public about building codes. It's, as you know, what needs to flow down from higher levels. And so it would probably be our intention to work on that in-house, maybe have, get everyone to look at it. Of course, our legal counsel would look at it, but we would not need to take that one to public hearing before it needs to be passed. We would just want to ensure that, essentially, I'm trying to ensure that we have all the paperwork that can immediately go into effect as soon as that's passed. And so, notably, there is quite a lot in that process. So, I think the one thing that we have learned from a planning and zoning perspective is, if you pass the ordinance, you should have all of the forms and applications ready to go. You can't pass the ordinance and say, well, fill out the paperwork, but we don't have the paperwork. So that would be kind of the only limiting factor. If this was to get passed and we didn't have, things ready to go, folks could still work around it. So kind of concurrently, both of those things need to move forward and get into effect pretty much immediately.
So adopting the building code doesn't take a public meeting. Which one does take the public meeting? Choosing.
Public hearing, still a public meeting. You all would need to vote.
Okay, so which part does take the public hearing?
The master fee schedule.
Master fee
Yeah,
schedule.
so
Okay.
and there should be fees associated with building permits because it's quite a lengthy process.
Yeah, just making sure.
That piece needs to go to public hearing. It needs to be 10 days notice, hearing, 10 days to comment on that. And then you all could vote to pass an amended fee schedule.
And we're on track to be able to have that by the end of March. Yes. So
what is San Juan County doing for county residents? Do they still have a building department and a building
they
permit?
have a building department that Kristen Bushnell oversees. They have no inspector. They will be working with Jones and DeMille at $180 an hour. Whereas what I've been able to figure out from conversations last week and this week, 90 to 120 looks to be the range of what we could privately contract with. There are a couple of options that Erin and I've been exploring for the emergency basis. And it looks like administratively, the low end would be 90, the inspection, the high end would be 120. But we're not.
And that's like per inspection, because most of these are going to need multiple inspections for the different, so just,
Yeah.
for listening in. It's not going to be $120. It's more than that.
Oh, yeah.
Usually,
So it's
usually it'll require 3 to 4
Yeah.
inspections
Four.
before you get a CO.
yeah, the proposals I've been listening to have been 4 with a wrap up of a 5th. So then you times that, and then the administrative fee. And if we have to go outside of San Juan County, and get someone from Price or Green River or wherever, it's gonna be more travel time will be built in. So on an emergency basis, Erin and I are, you know, mostly Erin, but we're running around getting information to try to get somebody in place to do the inspections while we are able to submit, kick out some kind of permitting process.
But that usually falls back to whoever's building to get the inspector here. It would affect us like at the old school and.
No, it affects us because at least as I understand that Utah Leagues of Cities and Government, and the new bill said that it is up to homeowner calls your building department has 3 days to come up with a building inspector for the homeowner. If that is not available, then the homeowner then has their choice to go out to any building inspector that they want.
But the town doesn't pay the building inspector.
The town does not pay the building inspector, but it's the town who is supposed to locate the building inspector of choice.
And you have to have a list. I mean, there's a long requirement of what happens now with building permit. And so hopefully we can find a fit on a temporary basis, on an emergency basis, which means in my mind that if Erin and I find a fit, we're going to snag it and then come to you and tell you if we've got it. Mm-hmm. We're not going to wait for a meeting where we can vote. We'll vote retroactively and have it be a temporary emergency option. We're really, as Erin pointed out, this is the start of decent weather for people to be able to build. We have one major project without a permit. We have a couple other in town that look like they probably need a permit, and we have no mechanism to deal with this. So,
and I think it's important to know in my discussions with the other entities that this probably isn't a great fit for planning and zoning approval. It is in everyone's best interest to have like one building official or however we deem them, but one individual who is responsible for the administrative side of things, because you don't want a bunch of hands touching it. It needs to be one person who's responsible. And so, you know, from a liability standpoint, if something does go wrong, that person is the person who's bonded, who's covered for all of this, strictly from the administrative side. In terms of the inspection side, clearly, you know, we're going to make it work long-term, no matter what it looks like. But this is going to come back to council in terms of, you know, how do we figure out what that position looks like? Whose responsibility is it going to be? Are we hiring someone else part-time? Are we, however we're doing it, but it is not just going to roll off to planning and zoning. It would still be very helpful for them to do the land use clearances and some of those other applications. But this is going to need to be probably a paid position who's handling the paperwork side of it. And then in addition to like the 3-day turnaround for a building inspection, once just an application for a building permit is submitted, the entity has 14 days to pretty much get the first part of it processed and back over to the individual based on a complete application, of course. So there are some tight deadlines that we have to consider, which again is why, you know, we would not want this kicked over to planning and zoning to handle. Nothing against planning and zoning, new, current, future. But yeah, we'll need like one person who's pretty much responsible and then a backup if that person was to leave or go on vacation. So as we're crafting this, definitely it's things that we should talk about and consider, and I could use the input.
Well, and in the process of adopting a building code, I think it's pretty standard. I mean, it's been a few years since I dealt with any of this, but it's pretty standard for places like there's the Utah Building Code, which is based on the International Building Code. So it's not like you have to reinvent the wheel. Okay, you have to use a 2x4 to do this. It's already been drafted and used. So I think we could just say something like we are adopting the Utah Building Codes for 2025 or the International Building Codes for 2025, and then your contractors and architects have a reference to go to understand how they need to drop buildings for this kind of stuff. So it's not like they're saying, okay, you now get to decide.
Right.
what
No.
you're gonna do.
There's a lot that can utilize from other, and that is a consideration though, is if we're looking at other entities, if theirs has not been updated recently or is referencing old international building code, we would want to, update that, of course. But yeah, lots of moving pieces, and I don't know if I've used the word emergency enough, but this is an emergency situation wherein the town has every right to find an emergency stopgap while we figure out the long-term solution. But as Ann said, if we find a good fit, we'll probably just need to run with that because, we cannot have this gap sitting out there. It's pretty concerning.
Kind of looks like Utah right now is using the 2021 IBC.
And this thing on the time schedule that was passed this last year where it's the 3 days, the 14 days and whatever, this was all done at the request of the Wasatch Front developers. They wanted to push this through. It got pushed through legislatively. No one was able to get them to get the legislature to understand that if you're rural or if you're the medium-sized city or town, some of these things, those deadlines cannot be met. Not meetable. So in addition to getting basically slammed by San Juan County and their processes were slammed by the legislative actions, and we'll just make the best of it. Erin won't be sleeping for the next 2 months, but don't worry about it. It's only budget time.
Apologies to the folks who have reached out to me, and I've gotten back to them a day or two later. That will continue happening until this is resolved.
Okay, so stay tuned for the next round. Number 4 is discussion of the weed grant from Clean Energy to Community Country Youth Corps for our run over there.
Yeah, I asked this to be on the agenda mostly for an update to all of you and to an update to the town, that this was a grant that we received last year or possibly the year before from Clean Energy in order to help get rid of the arundo and the giant cane in town. We did not get it. It was to Canyon Country Discovery Center. So it's not a town grant, but it was to Canyon Country Discovery Center for work down here in the river bottom to keep arundo from getting loose in the river bottom and on the river and down to the campsites and so on. It's a huge invasive weed problem that was planted as ornamental and windbreaks and whatnot in town. So they won the grant, and then they got into some problems with their association, and now they've passed it to the Bears Ears Partnership. And Kyle Lacing, okay, sorry if I messed up his name, but Kyle is now taking it on, and Clean Energy approved the transfer and allowed the extension. So what they've done is they've paid for a week or possibly 2 weeks of a crew, about 4 people to work quite long days, to owners that have it on their private property. And Clean Energy understood that it was on private property and it was here and for all these reasons. So what the town, but we need them, and we talked about mapping again. The AmeriCorps people came in and they mapped all of the stands in town. Got a lot of them taken out, some with spray, some with just digging out the roots. So there've been a bunch of them removed. There's been some education over these last few years of the need to get them out of people's yards. And it's the state requires that we get rid of this stuff. So anyway, what they'll need to do is reach out to property. What we need is, if that will save them some time, if there are any property owners that would like to help. If they know they've got it, most everybody knows that has it, I believe, pretty obvious in a yard. But if you know you've got it and are willing to have them come and help, they'll be able to start on it right away. March 15th, right in there is when they'll be done with their training and be ready to, it should be a Monday, whatever that thing is in the middle of March. But they'll they'll be ready to go. If nobody comes up with a stand to do, then we'll have to spend time mapping. Well, I'm trying to get people to, get help to get rid of their portion. And Britt is working with it too, so if you have anything to add to that.
Yep. The full TV Country Youth Corps is under Bears partnership after this was already in motion and we've taken it over. So thanks to Luanne for helping us figure out, because we didn't have a clue what was going on with this when we first opened it. So big things. And we'll try to get a town email out and maybe a flyer out in a couple places so people can see if they'll be in town.
Yeah, so, because there are some big stands still in town. So this is a great opportunity. Otherwise, it would be on the landowner to get rid of it on their own. They will be coming in, cutting and spraying the stumps. You just paint it. You have to do that within 15 minutes of cutting it, or it'll go back, and then you've got to come and cut it again. But
Do we still have that informational video on the website?
Just thinking that. I was just thinking that, and the details, I could put it on the same tab. I believe it's under our resident resources tab. Yeah, look at that. We've got a video, Utah's Noxious Weeds, stuff on goat heads too. But yeah, if you put that over there, or if you send it over to me, I can put a little thing on here as to who to contact and timeline and everything.
Okay, we'll get that for you.
yeah, and maybe put on the flyer that go to resident resources on the town Bluff website, because that explains, and they know for sure that they've got it. If they have question whether they've got it, they can call me too.
And I'm assuming that for the private landowners that are listening who don't want anybody taking out their product, nobody's going to be going on their property.
Everyone's going to be raiding
Right.
their property.
Right.
They might come knock on their door and chat with them and see if they want to make use of the able bodies, but if they don't want to, it's their property.
Because we will get calls.
Yeah. So
about this, so.
I'm going to have them all masked. Is that okay?
Yeah, and it's still, the program is still to educate young adults in the projects and to equip them to be able to go out and get jobs and be able to work. So that's part of the mapping. I don't believe we still have access to the original mapping, so that would be a good thing for them to learn how to do, is to map the site. And then we can also have them record what we've already done in case we need future grant or help to get the rest of it taken care of. But they can do that kind of thing, and then talking to the people, communicating, all that is worthwhile, and then they'll go in and do the actual hands-on work.
What about after it's cut, removing it?
They'll do that.
Part of it?
Yeah. Yep. And the roots are the dangerous part. That's what you don't want to just toss somewhere. You want to get those burned or something if you're doing it yourself. And a lot of people did it themselves after we did that with the AmeriCorps kids. They took it on themselves and took out a bunch. Some of them we did for them have grown back. One of them anyway, one instance has grown back that was not removed up to standard, but so it'll be on the list again, and they'll still be willing to do it again. But anyway, that's it on that, unless there's questions.
Pretty clear. Last time they were here, did they bring the chipper shredder down to?
The AmeriCorps guys, who had that shredder? They shredded it. I think it was the NRC that did that.
Yeah, it wasn't AmeriCorps because
No.
we didn't, that was one of the things AmeriCorps had to have a specialized person
Right.
through AmeriCorps
Yeah,
to be here.
because
So,
we shredded all that stuff over. Yeah, that's not a part of it.
Okay.
I mean,
We
it
can work
could
on it in
be.
the future.
Yeah, it
That
could
can be another one for sure.
But it works pretty well on it. We have an area. And like say the stems that are the thing that mostly is, those don't grow. They're really hazard.
The next is a report from today on a meeting with CERTA, and I just had to look up on my phone so I could get the words up. So SULOG, Southeastern Utah Local Government Association, found it too burdensome for people to remember how to say SULOG and what it stood for, so they changed to CERTA, Southeastern Regional Development Agency. And two people from CERTA came down today. One manages small loans and that type of thing, and the other one is a grant writer. And the question was kind of broad, like, we haven't seen Bluff at anything the last couple of years. Is there a problem? You know, we've revamped, we have new employees, we're doing things a little differently. And one woman is the person who oversees the community development block grants. So I was pretty candid about the CDBG grant, that the first one worked smoothly, the second one was a nightmare, and Erin and I just ended up having to give it up, because every time we submitted a piece of the project proposal, oh gosh, you were supposed to work under next year's rules. Oh gosh, you were under last year's rule. And we just couldn't, I mean, they were just all over the board. And we had done a low to moderate income study that they needed. And we just barely made that cut. So we hadn't done much with them in 2 years, other than weighing in on some meetings, but no request for help. So they have a grant writer who is willing, she's pretty in us on her radar. She'll keep us informed with grants. The one project I talked about was the CCC, how we're going to be short on funding for that. And I estimated kind of ballpark, I said, I know we're going to be at least 500, if not $1 million or more short, but that would be very helpful to have you keep an eye out for grants. She asked about the infrastructure. Where were we with infrastructure? And I explained that our EPA grant is an infrastructure grant. We thought that was really good, because apparently that is the hardest grant to get funding for. So she was pleased that that's not the piece that we're really lacking completely. She recommended that as we work letting CERTA work with, there were two foundations, Eccles was one and one was the other, and I told her that early on there'd been some enthusiasm by one particular person with Utah Geneva KF wanted to work with Eccles, but it was so disorganized in the concept that we didn't want anybody approaching a large foundation without a plan. And so she's able to offer help figuring out what we need, who can we approach, who does she approach on our behalf, which is really good. They plan to come down quarterly. And then the other was, we're talking about the CCC building, the playground, and next year, the community development block grant will be funding playgrounds.
That's good to know.
Yep. And so the woman who's heading CDBG said she would. So you always get a reminder, I think it's usually in May, that says the community development block grant orientation will be on this date in San Juan County. If your entity wants to explore CDBG funds, you shall attend this meeting. So you have to go. You don't have to do the grant, but you have to go to the meeting to get in the door. So she's going to be sending out the reminders, and she thought there was a very, there's a good opportunity right now for the next couple of years to get funding for playgrounds.
Do we still have to go in person to those meetings, or with the virtual option?
We talked about the virtual option pieces, about not how hard it is for a community to send one or two people up an hour, down an hour.
It's very prohibitive.
And so I'm hopeful that there'll be some consideration. They are working pretty closely with USU, which is how we did it one year. We did the meetings in Blanding, which was easier. They hand out books and they had somebody down there. We did it virtually. But their whole goal is to make the CDBG grant process more user friendly, but also rural user friendly. Like so in the past, like if we needed an engineer, you put it out for bid and you tried to get estimates, and knocks out a lot of the engineering people because they've already got an inside track. And now under CDBG starting this next year, if we have a relationship with an engineer like Jones and Janelle, then we can not only have the bid, but we can have the introduction done by Jones and Janelle. So they are trying to work this through. So they,
And for those block grants, we usually have to have a public hearing as well, right? That's one of those.
right, yeah.
I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, you have
to get community input as to what these projects could be.
Yeah, my recollection is you have two. You have one that's a fact finding one, like throw out your ideas and see what sticks. And then the second one is a public hearing on that particular project.
Thanks.
Yeah, and it really, I have found it really useful if two people work on it, because the books are literally books, usually about an inch and a half or two thick. And you have to be able to go back and forth, and it is so easy to miss a reference. And I'm hoping, we worked a little bit with the woman before, who's now taken this over, and she's pretty detailed. She's really very communicative, so I'm hopeful the process will be easier. And if we decide to put some grants and or some requests, that we can do it without pulling out unfair. So that was that. They'll come down in another probably 2 or 3 months. As an aside, today was chosen because they were going to Blanding or Monticello last night, and then they would be here this morning and go up to the commission meeting. So that's why the timing of it was today and this morning. However, yesterday when I didn't see an agenda posted and there was nothing even noted in the San Juan County website for a commission meeting, I emailed Matt McDonald and they canceled it. And so they didn't tell these folks that it was canceled. So they had several hours to kill before they went on to the next meeting up in Moab, because the Monticello mayor couldn't meet them in Monticello. They had to go to Moab to meet her. So they were doing a tour. So if you saw a CERTA van driving around, they were touring. One of the people had never been here. So it was whatever. All right, then next two are, they look similar. They are not similar. Number 6 and 7, Linda and I were going back and forth on. The first is discussion and vote on the letter of recommendation for Cow Canyon Coffee grant submission to the San Juan County Rural County Grant Program. So they submitted a draft letter of support that says, I think that was probably sent out. So basically, to get temperature control in the building where Cow Canyon Coffee is right now. And then tied to that, because to me, these are kind of,
Can I explain to you why they're different? Because I know why they're different. So the way that San Juan County is issuing this grant is that individual businesses can apply for the grant for improvement on their property. Since Cow Canyon Coffee is not the same business as Cow Canyon Trading Post, Cow Canyon Coffee is applying for the temperature development, and Cow Canyon Trading Post is applying for the gravel improvement.
so that's the second one. The second one is Cow Canyon Trading Post for the gravel improvement. So when I read these, they're both great ideas. This came up because of another situation on ADA compliance. And I'm wondering, I know it's really an $11 thing, but I'm certainly supportive of writing a letter of support, but I'm wondering if either of the entities thought about adding like an ADA compliant pad with a sign, since they'll be working in that, in the parking lot. It's just a thought. I think it's due the 7th. Is that Friday?
Yeah, it's coming up pretty quickly.
So any thoughts and comments, or is everybody okay with approving them?
Maybe this would be a good phase 1, and phase 2 is getting the 88 thing. They could maybe even apply for 2 different ones for later. They are right. It is kind of a safety thing dropping into that spot right now.
Well, and it could be a consideration of which tier they're going for the grant, because sometimes the ADA approved pad and everything else is quite a bit more expensive. So coming up with match money and things like that could have been in consideration with this, because I believe that this one was going to be considered as a tier 2 grant. Can't remember the specs exactly. But so the cost there could be a consideration with that.
That's a good point.
We'll all be thinking of ADA accessibility.
But I would think that the owner of Buchanan.
It does, exactly.
One of the
No, I
ones
mean,
who did think about
It
it.
does. I mean, like in general, everybody should be thinking about it. 'Cause
Yeah.
it does slip under the radar. They're both great. Do we need to do them 2 motions?
Yeah.
All right, motion to, accept the letter of recommendation for Cow Canyon Coffee Grant Submission to San Juan County Rural County Grant Program.
My second.
And my question is just, these are the only ones that we received, only businesses that wanted our town support going on to the county.
Is that a question?
Question?
These are the only ones I've seen.
And they don't have to get the town's approval, but I can't remember who they did have to get, letters of approval from several different people, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the town.
Mhm.
All in favor, say aye.
Okay.
Anyone opposed? It's unanimous. Then the next one is the one on Cow Canyon Trading Post Grant.
Yeah, motion to approve letter of recommendation for Cow Canyon Trading Post, grant submission to San Juan County Rural County Grant Program.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
All right,
Aye. Anyone opposed? It's unanimous. Then number 8, discussion and a possible vote on Jones and DeMille Engineering Services. And actually, I put this on. We have Michael Habitant.
Hey, hi, everyone.
Hi, Michael. I put this on not necessarily to vote on anything, but just in case there was something we had to vote on, we do it. But in order to have Michael explain exactly what we're doing so everyone understands and what those engineering services look like. So Michael, do you want to give a summary of what the engineering services look like?
Yeah, so right now we're on the verge of completing the review of the bid documents for Calf Canyon Road and for 7th Street West curb and gutter detail there. And we're going over that with the roads committee tomorrow afternoon. And from there, there are some minor corrections to the documents. And from there, it'll go back to the engineer. And hopefully within a week, it'll be ready to go out to bid. And so that's what's going on that project. And then Jones and DeMille, pro forma, created a budget proposal for the old highway improvement project. So just to recap, that's Navajo Twins Drive, 7th Street East, Black Locust, and 4th Street East. 1,226,500. Now that's a proposal that includes a sidewalk along the entire length, ADA sidewalk. So that's the first step for that project. The balloon is in the air, and the next step is to get to feasibility and to schematic drawings, which when we have schematic drawings, and then we can look for funding sources. So I don't know, I met with the engineers last Wednesday about that, and they suggested that perhaps the sidewalk portion, which is 229,000 budgeted, there might be money from UDOT for the active transportation programs. I don't know if there is, because it's not on a UDOT highway. So anyway, any questions?
Any questions?
Thanks for doing all that work, Michael.
Yeah,
You're
we'll have-
welcome.
And then we have
So-
a road. Go ahead,
I'm sorry.
Michael.
No, I was just gonna say, it's unfortunate that guy went out there and backfilled that section of Calf Canyon Road, because, well, I'll just say that.
Good intentions should have been run by the town, and we would have told them not to do it, but that, we'll work with it. Lou, since we're all in the same room, 1 o'clock works for you tomorrow? Michael, 1 o'clock, our time, 3 o'clock, your time.
Yeah, that's fine. Yep.
All right. So we'll see you tomorrow then at 3 your time, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, then. Report on February 24th, 2025, San Juan County Tourism Task Board meeting, and Jen and Linda, that's yours.
So we meet quarterly. And this was the first meeting of, the new year. And so we went over marketing, all the things, the ways we're marketing, how we marketed last year. The county does a great job marketing, and a lot of it does hit the southern part of the county, because there's so much down here. They bring tour operators down here. They have things on Facebook. They hit various towns, cities, countries. And so we've worked with the same company for several years. And so that makes it even a little more seamless. So
yeah, there was some discussion that the tourism office in particular has taken kind of a big hit this year, because Goulding's has not contributed their sales tax or PRT tax, or can't remember what the acronym is for the restaurant tax. Anyways, all of those taxes for the past year since the transfer of the sale went to the tribe. It has not been removed off of tax rolls yet, so it's wondering if there's some talk about it will be going to litigation to get those taxes recovered. Allison has adjusted for the lack of the TRT taxes from Goulding's, which is quite significant to her budget, into her 2025 budget. She hasn't counted on having that money. If she by some miracle gets it, then great, give her a good boost. But that was reported on. There was also some discussion about the state is looking at implementing an additional, it was kind of hard for me to understand. I think it's additional 1% TRT tax that the hotels will be instructed to start collecting. I don't know when the date is that will be implemented in, but they're restructuring a little bit how the TRT tax will be spent. Bluff, so San Juan County in general wasn't too affected by it. I think that we may lose, or not lose money, but it might be directed a little bit differently the way that it was restructured. But it was based on how much TRT you collect, and we kind of fell into a category where we didn't change very much. So basically that was how much the percentage of that TRT funding you had to spend towards, attracting new visitor services, promotion, that type of thing. And then some of it was in the smaller counties in particular, or the smaller collecting counties. They were going to be able to divert more of that money from tourism spending to mitigation costs. It doesn't seem like we're going to be affected by that too much. I don't think that they're going to adjust the TRT budget too much from where we stand. It might be a little bit more is slated towards mitigation costs for tourism than previous, but not so like some, I think Emory was one of them, and Carbon. Some their tourism tax advisory board committees will basically be gutted. So it was, I mean, it's, I don't know. Depends on how you look at it, but I mean, from the tourism perspective, it's nice to be able to use those monies for promotion.
So there are two kinds of TRT taxes, which are tourism taxes. We have the municipal one, which Lou applied for, like 4 or 5 years ago, and that's based that, and so we can use it for things, well, pretty much anything actually, because we can use it for, because the tourists come and they use, our roads, our facilities, all kinds of things. So that 1% tax, we don't have.
Yeah,
So-
that's a totally separate. So the TRT tax that will be included is the state collected TRT tax that will be raised to an additional 1%, I believe it was. And that's the one that they pretty much dictate how the county per se
Yeah.
is slated to distribute those funds. And like I said, I don't think that there are too many. I don't think we're going to see a big diversion of funds from how the county has been slated to spend those as it is. Whereas some of the counties that don't collect as much TRT tax will basically lose their, most of that money will be slated towards other items other than promotion, which is kind of a big deal for those kinds of.
So because I haven't seen any of it in the news, but is it basically adding to the TRT tax that everybody across the state is adding another 0.5%?
No, everybody's adding a whole percent.
Adding a whole percent.
Yeah, it's going to be big. And like I said, Allison wasn't sure when it was going to be implemented or not. They were actually proposing a 4% increase, and UTIA, who is our it's Utah Tourism Industry Board, basically fought very hard against that to say if you add 4% tax on this, you're going to, it's going to be detrimental for visitation in our state, because that would increase our TRT tax from, I believe that TRT currently is
Like 13 point something.
that's our total,
They're saying
that's
that
our total
everything,
tax
yeah.
collection. I believe that the TRT tax that we pay right now is 6%. So adding on an additional 4 onto that would have been a 10% tax on rooms, which is a lot. People already complain about how much sales tax they're paying when they come to stay. So I was glad that UTF fought for us and was able to kind of cap that out of the 1% increase.
So another thing they do is they show us the top 10 cities, top 10 countries that visit. So that the states, Colorado, California. Unfortunately, the top #1 country that visits is Canada. So I think, and this is the time of the year that they would really come down, because we're, it's spring and they still have winter. So that's probably going to take a big hit.
They can just pay another 25% more. Don't worry about it. Well, thanks for doing it. I never understand the tax piece of it, so if it helps to have.
Well, it'll be really interesting to see when that's implemented. And I did ask if we had a date for a presentation, because all of us have to adjust our rates to make that up. And Allison said she hasn't had a specific date yet, but
But it's all
homeowners
approved.
expect it to be coming down the pipe. I'm sure the state tax commission will notify us when we have to implement it.
All right, then moving to number 10, a discussion on the public hearing for the amended master fee schedule. And as Erin talked about it, and it's over to her because she laid out the master fee schedule. And if you remember, we passed the master fee schedule initially, and then we amended and added a couple things this last year. But now with having to add the building permitting process, Erin's worked on the schedule, which we have to have a hearing for.
Yeah, so in your agenda packet and what will be available on our website shortly, is this suggested master fee schedule. So the first page is what the current master fee schedule reads. And then I have it broken down into sections. So administrative. I did throw some other things in there just of things that we're looking at. Certainly if we don't have ordinances or resolutions that are adopting these types of things, we cannot charge for them. But to avoid needing to go back and do multiple iterations of this, at least before the end of the fiscal year, that's why that's in there. So for folks listening online, something like an animal license, not assessing it right now, but if it was on the master fee schedule and approved, then when an ordinance was to take effect, we would have the ability to, start charging for those things. So of course, all of this is up for discussion. That's why we have the public hearings. If folks have input as to how they want, if something just seems completely unreasonable. I will note that as a municipality, for all of our fees and permits, this is not intended to create revenue. It is to cover the administrative costs of providing these types of services. Skipping straight to the building permit and land use section, Monticello and Blanding each have the exact same fee schedule for building permits. So given that the town has never assessed this type, or, we have not done this type of administrative work before, I do think it makes sense to adopt something very similar to what they currently use. I imagine they've got a pretty good idea as to what building permits, kind of what is needed. And both of them do it based off of a sliding scale of the total project cost. So in the building permit application, we get that information from the applicant, and then the building permit is based off of that valuation. Something that's built into landings is a refund policy. So the building permit, if someone doesn't want to move through with it, if they have notified us within 90 days, they could get a refund proposed, or after 90 days, no refund. I do think that if we were to utilize something like this, we would want to think about how the permitting timeline takes place. So typically the idea would be that a building permit is, the construction is completed within a year. And usually if we're not seeing work on that property, either the permit expires or there are other deadlines there. So just don't have to talk about it today, but that's why that's in there. It should be noted that the state does take 1% of the permit fee. So that needs to be in here somewhere. So that doesn't go to us, that goes to the state. Big one is this inspection fee. Currently, I just have it notated variable at cost, but certainly something that we should talk about. And then the plan reviews, I know we have some like site plan review stuff, but we need to specify what's what and what's going everywhere. In terms of, I have it noted in here, and again, this is all for public comment, it's for your comment. I am recommending for variance applications as well as zoning text amendments or zoning map amendments. Those are pretty lengthy discussions. There's a lot of research that goes into it. So I am recommending potential increases there. Just red is where I'm proposing changes. And then as I was looking through everyone else's master fee schedules, doing this research, When we're talking about building code, there's a very common element of assessing penalties if folks do have building code violations that they're, that they're aware of and they're not mitigated, or they're not in compliance for other things. So please note, these are just suggestions. That's why we go through this entire process. I did update the facilities rental to reflect what we currently assess, with potential, I've been out of town, sorry. Recommendation, like if we want to do things with West Park, maybe we should just strike through that. But again, please look at the red areas and provide feedback. I will go ahead and post this on the website with the public hearing notice, which, moving on, is going to take place during our regular meeting on March 18th. It did go to the San Juan Record, and again, we did have to expedite this just because of the deadlines that we're under to get this building code all taken care of. So on the March 18th meeting at approximately 4:15, we will host a public meeting for the master fee schedule. Lots of stuff thrown at you. Questions?
And just to add to that, on our work session next Tuesday, this will be on there for discussion internally, so we can ask questions before we get to public hearing. So we're not asking all of our questions in time at the public hearing with the council. So lots of questions. I think the only thing that I would throw out is, and I'll probably skip to this, I'm adamantly opposed to refunds. And the reason is because the reason you don't give refunds is to avoid the developer or the builder for coming in and putting in 5 applications, and you taking 5 applications and doing the administrative work, and 89 days, whoops, I want my money back. You've already spent the time. Something reasonable like a week, but 30, 60, 90 days, I would not be on playing with that one. So
I'm okay with that too. And again, the whole purpose is we are not creating revenue from this, but it is covering the administrative costs. And we do have some highly administrative things that we handle. So I'll put that on the website. I'll put the notice on the website. San Juan Record should be publishing the notice tomorrow and next week. And then we'll get it posted around town. And yeah, good comment on the work session though. We can kind of go through that. And if there were any modifications made there, I can maybe have both copies of what was originally discussed versus if you make suggested changes in the work session, that can go on the website too. And then folks will have 10 days after the public hearing to comment. So there's plenty of time to comment.
So Erin, do you know, I see this project cost and then the value on the side did they use a percentage or something to come up with these numbers?
That's one piece I'm not quite sure of. I can definitely reach out to those cities to understand exactly where they got this. I will say Moab has the exact same fee schedule right now. It just is kind of across the region, but I'll ask about the percentage.
Even, just doing a back
Yeah.
figuring would tell you, but I didn't have time to look at it.
I think that usually people who are at this stage of applying for a building permit probably already have plans done and have gotten a cost estimate from their contractor as to what they're building or what it's going to cost them. You got to get funding and you got to.
Yeah, but I'm not entirely sure because, as it slides up, even like the additional for each additional 1,000, like all of that changes as well. So, but I can try to seek some clarification. I'm wondering who had the original one and which ones are the copies, but I can reach out to figure out exactly how this was constructed because I think that's a question you could get at the public hearing too. Is how did you pull 2350 out of the air for a starting point?
Well, yeah, and then it's like $23.50 for the first 500 plus $3.05 for each additional $100. So what does that add up to? Anyway, I was just curious if you had figured it out. If you haven't, I can look at it.
It wasn't my math, but I'll see if there's a good template that we can at least explain. Okay.
Okay, so the next thing is discussion and vote to pay bills. Erin.
Alrighty, so you should have gotten the accounts payable receivable report. I did have, so I've got our routine stuff that we're doing like payroll. accounting, utilities and things like that, planning and zoning stipends. And then I did reach this individual today, who's taking the EMT training course. And so we've already paid for her tuition, but she's requesting reimbursement for the cost of the exam, which is $136. And so this TBD would be $136 as a check to her as reimbursement, on the docket today. And then, yeah, any questions about that accounts payable report? And if not, can I get a motion to pay the bills?
Has the test already been taken and passed?
I don't believe it's been,
That's what I was wondering. It
Can
seems like
can we require proof of passing the test before we just write a blank check of, yes, we'll cover it?
yeah, because I think we just had that discussion like a couple months ago of some stipulations before we reimburse the whole thing, or
Yeah.
part of it or something. I can't remember it exactly, but
I can definitely take that back, the proof of passing it before we pay for it. I did, when speaking with this individual, it did come, I want to make the council aware that, and as no surprise, that it, for folks who live in Bluff to go take the course in Monticello, there are a lot of additional costs, wear, tear, gas, all of that. And then of course, just the time commitment of driving up there. And so I have had some conversations about the individual about, they didn't realize how much of a commitment it is and how many additional costs are associated with it. And so, not necessarily that we can do anything about that right now, but I believe that's why she was reaching out to get it paid earlier. I believe she's already paid for it. I don't know if she's passed it yet.
I don't recall, and it just could be my memory. I don't recall a discussion about having passed it. How to reimburse that you have to pass in order to get.
I thought we had talked about that as well. Yeah.
When we originally talked about like the percentage paid at what point, we had talked about them passing, being approved, like having certification and then doing a reimbursement. For the cost of the class, the town did just pay the county directly because we were invoiced by the county. We didn't pay anything to this individual in terms of the class cost. But yes, I believe Jen is correct that we had talked about them passing it.
The only reason I say that is because I know multiple people who have gone all the way through the program, everything else, go to take the test, fail the test, fail the test, fail the test, fail the test, and therefore then they quit. And at that point in time, we're out however much money with no, with no benefit from it, actually.
And this is a hard situation too. I mean, we only had one person apply and one person who signed up for it. It's clearly a much needed area. I think, as we talked about last time, like there's just no perfect solution for this at all. But I do recognize from a financial impact, this isn't ideal for anyone.
So, and with the, I had also brought up with the custom fit, one of the requirements for getting reimbursed for your custom fit. That's a program that the state does for partial reimbursement of employee training. But one of the things that you have to do to get your custom fit training is to successfully complete the course, passing the course, and then therefore then you can get reimbursed for it. If you don't pass the course, then there's no reimbursement.
I don't think we did that last time because two people passed, one person didn't pass, and there's been times in similar situations, like actually the post office test, where they probably didn't pass because they were not good at reading.
I know we did something at a meeting, and we'd have to look back at the minutes, I guess, because none of us are remembering exactly what we decided, but we did vote on something.
Yeah, we did vote. I would agree that we voted on something. So just we can check the minutes and see what we agreed to. Otherwise, Erin, you can motion.
So, motion to pay the bills with, I guess, the amendment discussed.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Did you do the monthly financial report also?
Yeah, I attached that, since there's still some stuff going into February. That's not the final for February. But you could take a look at where we're at year to date, especially as we approach budget season. It's always good to familiarize yourself with that report. And then Linda's recorder will send out like the official, but things are still moving as we move stuff, and pay the bills for all the February expenses.
I thought when you said that I'd skip an item as usual. Oh, I got through the whole thing in the, no, I didn't. On the other, I have one other, which is just an apology, but not really. Next Tuesday is gonna be long. Planning and zoning can't make the 11th work. So they're gonna come back with some dates that they can do it. So I'm gonna go through, I'm looking at the agenda for the work session. I'll call off things that we absolutely have to have planning and zoning in on. But it is still one long list and long day. So I think what we initially moved to is starting at 9:30 to accommodate schedules. I think it would be a good idea to start at 9:30 with the idea that we'll do something during lunch and get through as much as possible. I know it's a long day commitment, but we need to have some of these things cleaned up before we get to the budget and lose Erin to the budget piece.
So when are you proposing?
The 11th next week
But not at our regular meeting time,
at the work, no, that's a work session.
at 4.
No, starting at
Starting work session
9:30,
at 9:30 in the morning.
starting at 9:30 and going
Instead of 4.
instead, unless you want to start at 4 and end at midnight.
And then how long are you talking roughly?
I'm
Just a-
thinking probably 3
Okay.
to 3.
I didn't see that time change come out. I've got something at 9
At 9:30.
till about 10:30.
So can everyone commit to being available 10 to 4? With the idea that we'd like to not go to 4, but
I have usually pick up Lottie at 3. But the starting point is great.
okay, so what we can do is about 10 to 4 on the 11th. Erin and I talked about lunch. I will try to rank it in the order that feels like it's priority. So if we get to 2:30 and the place blows up and we're not done, But we've done the crucial one. If anybody looks at it, I can get it out pretty quickly this week because I've already got the list. So when I'm done prioritizing it, if you disagree with me, please just let me know. It's movable. But the idea is to kick through some of these things that are sitting out there that we'd like to wrap up.
So you want to do a work session from 10 to 4 and then a work session from 4 to 5:30, or you're
No.
just changing out the 4 o'clock
No,
and
okay.
just changing the time to 10?
Remember what we're doing now, just not easy for me to remember. Our first meeting of the month is a regular meeting. Second meeting, which would be the 11th, is a work session. The third Tuesday is a meeting. So all I'm doing is I'm stretching out our work session from 10 to 4.
But we didn't change the time of every work session, or didn't do that, did we?
No,
What do you mean?
no.
Well,
That
it's
just applies to this.
Just
Yeah,
this
specific work
particular
session.
day, we're switching to
This
10.
particular day,
Okay,
which I had put out there as a joint work session for planning and zoning for all of us to be in the same room, the same time for an extended period of time. And planning and zoning came back and said they can't get their folks together for that.
okay. My apologies, I do not see it and I did not see it. So I will look and see if I just missed it or what happens.
But if we're all in agreement that it's 10 to 4 next Tuesday, then, and if things come up and you're not, I can't make you stay here. So
Oh.
let's. But I will tell you this, you're not coming for the $25 person lunch and leave. So, okay, anybody have any other? Okay, then if not, we need a motion to move into.
Motion to move into executive session pursuant to Utah Code 52-4-204. We will adjourn from that session.
Second.
And the purpose is to discuss any other pending litigation. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone else? Then we are adjourned. It is 5:30 exactly. And close up the building.